Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We are going to just take a couple of minutes to let everyone in.
Yes, very pleasantly surprised by how many people, so it'll take us just a bit to admit everyone. Thank you for being patient.
Emily had help, but the help is not feeling well today. So
Yeah.
we're going to be doing some admin stuff while we're hosting. She
Yep,
is. I'm just helping.
getting some emails now about needing to find the link. Oop, there's another person. Our plan was to wait until 3 minutes after the hour, but we might have to give it just a little bit of time. I know that with the meeting change, it might take people to find a little bit to find this link. So thank you all for being patient and celebrate while we wait.
Absolutely. It is wonderful to see you all and or to welcome you all for those of you I can't see. We are very happy to have you.
Okay.
And I know people have different feelings about chat, especially those of us who get distracted easily. Please feel free to say hello in the chat if you'd like to, or to start adding questions there. If you don't want to, that's just fine as well.
I will be doing my best to monitor the chat. We are going to leave about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. And so I will be trying to track questions as they pop up. So go ahead and put them in the chat. And I am going to try to monitor it as best I can. And please retype your question if I have missed it at the end when we're going through Q&A. Okay, lots of people coming in now. Very good.
And from all over the place too. We've got
All over.
Boston and South Wales and Newcastle, UK, and lots of people from the UK.
Wow.
Awesome. Welcome.
Lots of friends, a very global celebration. This is exciting.
It's also good that we
Hi,
have
Lisa. Nice to meet you. Hi, Sunny. Oh my gosh, so many. Now I'm seeing them, Rachel.
I just realized that the UK hasn't moved their clocks yet for the spring, so it's a shorter time period, so it's a little bit earlier in the day, which is great.
It is great.
Hey, Coach Lee, I see you, and Elaine, and we've got Canada in the house, and Chicago, and Brazil. This is awesome. And what we can do with the questions also is if we don't get to all of them, we can keep the chat and take a look at it afterwards. And I'm happy to answer questions, or Emily and I, if they're for both of us, are happy to answer questions later, and we can maybe send those out in an email.
Yes, we will do a follow-up email, which will include links to the recording. I see that there's a few AI chatbots in here recording. That's totally fine. We'll also try to send up a follow-up with any questions that we've missed, and we'll try to respond as well as sending out the recording. I think we have a bit of a quorum here, Rachel. What are you thinking? Should we get started?
I absolutely think we should get started. I will ask, hey, Christina, personal hello to Christina in Utica. I will ask those of you who are not on mute to please mute yourselves because there's a little bit of a distraction coming in. So,
Yes, and I will mute everybody. Don't worry, Rachel.
okay.
Or, okay. I just need to make sure that I don't end up muting you.
I think I can unmute myself. Let's see if we can do that. Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I was making sure I didn't mute you, Rachel, as this would be a very boring fireside presentation if you were muted the whole time.
I could do signs. I could do like dancing, interpretive dance. We're good.
Okay. So we have a quorum. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited for everyone to be here. Again, this is our neurodiversity celebration for the week. This is embracing and leveraging neurodivergent strengths. This is a fireside chat with myself. I'm Emily Kapszukiewicz, and I am going to be chatting with Rachel Radway here today. Rachel, I'm so glad that you're here. Wanted to just give some quick thanks to Neurodiversity Celebration Week, the organization that makes this possible. This is our first year doing this. It seems like this is growing. So wanted to just thank the organization and thank all of you for taking time out of your day, being able to celebrate with us. This is an exciting time. And so we love seeing everyone's face. The reason why we're hosting this celebration this year is that we have a new nonprofit organization called Squirrel Space, as you can see in my background. Squirrel Space is joining this movement and exists to help create resources and awareness and support for people who are neurodiverse and identify as neurodivergent. And some of our programming really includes some community programming and making sure that we're adding to this strengths-based movement where we're really honoring ourselves, our bodies, our minds, and our experiences as very authentic and validated. And that's an important part of celebrating being ourselves. And so I'm very proud to be here representing Squirrel Space. And I'm also proud to bring on Rachel, where we practice something that we've called as acorn sharing, which is sharing our stories. So with that, I would like to introduce Rachel, who is a certified leadership coach. She's an executive coach as well, consultant and speaker, and now an award-winning author of her book, Perceptive. She has more than 25 years of experience in corporate leadership roles at startups and national nonprofits and Fortune 100s. And with compassion and this deep understanding of the disconnects between the corporate world and our brains that are just wired differently, Rachel really helps focus and work with high-achieving, highly perceptive, and neurodiverse and neurodivergent clients lead with confidence, clarity, and authenticity, and without burning out. Her book, Perceptive: Insights for Leaders Who Feel More, Process Deeply, and Think Differently, reframes misunderstood and stigmatized neurotypes, including HSP and ADHD, as a set of strengths and leadership assets that come with challenges and the other side of the coin, and not as weaknesses or problems to be solved. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel. I'm glad to have you here. Really, before we start our chat, I think we can celebrate your book winning 4 awards already, even a year after less than a year after it's published. Can you share anything about how you feel with us, on the celebration week?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me, Emily. I am so excited to be here. And, it's funny, I feel a little bit about this week like we sometimes feel about International Women's Day or Mother's Day. Why should there only be one period of time to celebrate? And yet, we get a week, mothers only get a day, right? So this is a beautiful thing, and I am really happy to be here and celebrating with all of you. And as far as the book goes, yes, I'll just show if anybody wants to see. This is what the cover looks like. I am super excited about it. It's, when you put something like a book out into the world, especially for the first time, you have no idea how it's going to be received and how people are going to respond to it. And it's just an incredible honor to know that it's been received so well and that it has spoken to people, and the feedback I've gotten has been really beautiful. And it's especially valuable to me since I wasn't even planning on writing a book. So
Well, yes, absolutely. Congratulations again. I can't even imagine writing a book, and this is really something to celebrate. And I'm sure the folks here will celebrate with you. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing your journey with us. But let's dig in here. So
Sure.
It sounds like we're kind of touching on some of the desire and the original motivation that you had for writing the book. So can you tell us explicitly, why did you write it, and who is this really for?
Sure. So like I said, I wasn't planning on writing a book. I was actually approached by a publisher They do this a lot. Hybrid publishers reach out to lots of people who have businesses and who have a mission and a message, and they want you to write a book. And I had said no to a lot of people. It was still very early in my business, and I didn't really, I was focused on the business and on clients, and really didn't think that there was a book in what I was doing. But this one particular person was A, persistent, and B, really understood the message and the challenge inherent in my message. So originally, when I started coaching, I was talking to women leaders who identified as highly sensitive. So those of you who are familiar with the HSP neurotype, we'll call it a highly sensitive person. Elaine Aron wrote a book on that in the late 90s. And that was really the person that I was speaking to. And I was speaking with women leaders, mostly in the corporate world, and most of them had not heard of the book or the type and didn't know that it was a thing. But on top of that, these were smart, high achievers, talented, strong women who didn't necessarily want to be thought of as highly sensitive, which is still a kind of derogatory term in our culture. And um, this publisher understood that, and he's the one who actually came up with the term perceptive. And as soon as I heard it, I everything clicked. I was just like, yeah, he gets it. And that makes sense because all of the different definitions of perceptive kind of overlay on the traits of highly sensitive people. And I didn't end up publishing with that publisher, but I still give him the thanks he's due for coming up with the title and getting me started. As far as who it's for, it is really for anyone who grew up with messages like, you're too sensitive, or you're too much, or you're not enough, or you're broken, or you're doing things the wrong way, or you have to grow a thicker skin. And I know I had a lot of those messages growing up. And some of us have them not even, after we've grown up, we still get them as adults. It is for anyone who knows that they are wired a little differently, that they process the world a little bit differently. And it's also sort of a secondary audience is for anyone who wants to make their spaces more welcoming and more inclusive and wants to understand the way that other people function and experience the world.
Wow, that's a lot. And so, I mean, just the reframe of sensitive into perceptive, it sounds like that was, a really positive, affirming kind of mental switch to use for you. I can see your face light up when I'm saying that. What are you thinking?
So absolutely. I mean, for a long time, I had decided that I wasn't going to use the term HSP just because it was so misunderstood and stigmatized.
Mm,
And I had been talking about high sensory perception
hmm
as a different way to look at this trait. It really is about our inner senses, our external senses, the way we perceive the world. So putting that together with the word perceptive made complete sense. And the reframe really appealed to people when I did, sort of informal checking in with a lot of different people, especially my clients, which is, who were my primary audience. Um, they loved it and they all related to it. And the important thing was, again, HSP has a lot of negativity associated with it, even though there are some positive things too. Nobody thinks of perceptive in a negative light. There are no negative connotations to the word. So
hmm
it was really a big shift.
Yeah. Yeah. And, what we really celebrate with Squirrel Space and with a lot of your work is this sharing stories and how you changing this word and sharing it with people could help them reframe it as well. Now you have other language and labels that you use throughout the book, and I know we've got an audience, from different parts of the country. So could you maybe unpack some of the terms that you use in the book and just help us understand what are some of these common terms that you're mentioning throughout the book that we need to know?
Sure. I talk about language throughout. And one of the things, I mean, this is, a lot of you found out about this event through Neurodiversity Week celebrations. So So you may be familiar with a lot of them, but just for those of you who don't, or for those of you who are newer to this, um, we talk about neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And one of the things that is interesting to me about neurodivergence is no two brains in the world are the same. Even identical twins have different brains. So if neurodivergence is diverging from the, and I'm going to use air quotes here, neurotypical, who is it that decides what neurotypical is or what that looks like? I mean, whose brain is that based on, right? It's the one brain in the world that somebody decided was the neurotypical brain. That's just the way I look at it. There's obviously a lot of sensitivity around a lot of these terms. Some people like using neuroatypical. Some people like neurospicy, and then there is a group who don't like neurospicy for specific reasons. We talked about highly sensitive and highly perceptive, and there are so many terms, especially when you start getting into different forms of neurodivergence. Um, a lot of people are really object to the term ADHD because of the disorder part of it, and there are people who are trying to coin different terms for that trait itself. So it's a complicated topic. Um, my message in the book is really that it's not about the labels. You can identify however you choose to identify. And one of the beautiful things about the neurodivergent community is we all accept that and we accept self-diagnosis as valid. And it's really about finding a community, and we'll come back to this theme of people with similar values and people who do value inclusion and the fact that we all experience the world in a slightly different way.
Mm. Yeah, I'm noting some questions in the chat. There's some good ones that we'll come back to. But thanks for sharing that, Rachel, about the different terms. I'm curious, is there a term that you like to celebrate or to use that I should use throughout the rest of the Fireside chat?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm not picky. I consider myself neurodivergent. I also identify as ADHD, so a combination of autism and ADHD. Some of that is formally diagnosed, some of it is self-diagnosed, but I'm open.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we talk a little bit about like superpowers and challenges, and in particular, you call out some of these in your book. Are there any that you want to focus on for purposes, of this discussion or that really resonate with you, Rachel?
Absolutely. And I'm noting one of the questions in the chat, and I'll talk directly to that too. So I'll start with the challenges, and I don't think these will be a major surprise. The ones that I talk about in the book primarily have to do with things like setting boundaries or an inability to set boundaries. We tend to put everyone else before ourselves. We also tend to be very highly conscientious and want to do good, want to make an impact, want to take care of everything, and we put ourselves last. So boundaries is often an issue, and just being able to say no. Um, Perfectionism, going back to, our conscientiousness, we often have very high standards for ourselves and for others. And that leads us to sometimes not want to do things unless we know it's going to be perfect. We are often very talented at a lot of things, and so it gets frustrating when we're not good at something out of the gate. Um, and sometimes we have trouble delegating for the same reason too, that perfectionism. And then some of the challenges I talk about are specific to sensory challenges and what that's like in a workplace, for example. Open space workspace is what I'm the word is escaping me. The open plan workspaces.
Oh yeah, like open concept where there's like no walls and everything echoes, one of those.
Exactly, which are, such a nightmare for so many of us. And, for me personally, sound has always been a really big issue. I am very, very, very sensitive to sound. I get distracted very easily. I cannot work when there are other people making any kind of noise around me. So, and I know some people on the other side love to have music or other things going on, which helps them concentrate. It's hard to have those two people in one space and have both of them be able to focus, right? So I talk a lot about different kinds of sensory issues and the challenges that those bring. But I really want to switch to the gifts and the superpowers because with those high standards that I talked about, we are often really hard on ourselves. And we tend not to recognize as much the things that we're good at. I've got a lot of clients who are brilliant, and yet they see their gifts as things that everybody has and everyone can do, instead of really embracing those as gifts and superpowers. And one of the questions that I saw in the chat was about empathy and hyper empathy. And this is something that I see in every single one of the clients that I've worked with. And I've worked with many dozens of people at this point. I should say almost all of my clients identify as neurodivergent, not all of them. But one of the things that comes through is an amazing amount of empathy, not always for ourselves, but for the people around us. And that can be a struggle as well, because again, we don't want to hurt people. So we might have trouble communicating in a way that, gets the point across. We want to take care of other people, so we put ourselves last. So we overwork ourselves, and we all kinds of things around that empathy. And at the same time, it is a beautiful gift. And the clients of mine who are people leaders, who lead teams and lead organizations, are absolutely the ones that people love and follow, because they feel seen by their leaders, and they know that their leaders respect them, give them autonomy, want to help them grow and develop. And they don't see that from other leaders in their organizations. So that empathy, I know, we could talk about the whole double empathy problem. It's not a thing that neurodivergent people don't have empathy. We often have so much empathy that it is actually something that we need to we need to learn to manage ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about boundaries and sort of this overflowing of empathy. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know
sorry,
go ahead.
I forgot, just really quickly, I'll mention some of the other gifts and superpowers, because I focus so much on that. I forgot to mention the other ones. But there are so many that I see. And it doesn't mean we all have all of them, but these are themes that I see a lot. We tend to be really good at connecting dots, at seeing patterns, at making connections between things that other people don't necessarily make connections between. And this is fantastic for things like strategic thinking and planning. We often can see several steps down the line. I have one client who calls this her Sherlock Holmes ability. This can be a challenge in ways too. And again, I talk about the strengths and challenges as being two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. But because we are constantly downloading so much information and processing so much, because we have fewer filters, we are seeing the connections between those things more quickly, and often, sometimes other people aren't seeing them at all. That can be super frustrating when, for example, we're in a corporate environment and an executive makes a decision that we can see is not going to work out the way they think it's going to work out. And yet, it's intuition, it's not data-based, right? We don't have an explanation for why it may not work out the way they think it is. So we can argue all we want, and yet we're still going to be told, this is the decision, you need to move forward. But that ability to make connections and to see patterns and to think several steps ahead is a superpower that is incredibly important. There are lots more, and we could go into them if there's time, but I've already been talking a lot, so.
No, this is wonderful. One thing I was curious about, because we had talked about perception and the word perceptive being a reframe for what was considered a deficit or being sensitive, and just switching that word, are there other examples or things that you would kind of encourage our audience to challenge themselves on? Are there any words or kind of phrases or things that you've heard, that you would help give our audience a starting point to reframe that on?
So, interesting question. I think my work with individuals and even with groups is really all about reframing. It's about looking at the things that you often think of as challenges and reframing them to see how they can benefit you. Um, Something that comes up is a lot of us are very direct. We don't necessarily like small talk. We don't necessarily play politics well. In fact, most of us really dislike any kind of office politics that are going on. We're about being real, right? Authenticity is very important, and things like justice are very important to us. That directness can be incredibly valuable if we learn how to balance it. So sometimes it's very hard for us to hold back. At the same time, there are a lot of people who can't be direct, don't know how to be direct, and they keep kind of weaving around things, which drives some people crazy. I mean, clarity is kindness. And when you are in, I talk a lot about leadership because that's my area. When you are in a leadership role and you're giving someone feedback, now I know we can be really sensitive to feedback ourselves, and it can be because of our empathy, it can be hard for us to deliver hard feedback. And yet, you can draw on that strength of directness to be kind and clear in the feedback that you're providing, and pair that with your empathy so that the person you're talking to knows that you care about them and knows that you are doing this for their growth and development and for the benefit of the team, and that it's not a personal attack, which is the way a lot of feedback can come across. So that's just one.
Thank you. And I
I'll have
like
to think
what
about
you
it.
thank you. And I like what you shared too about how a lot of your work really focuses on that reframe, because it sounds like that's a big part of the switch, and it takes practice and some coaching to develop that muscle to do that. It sounds like maybe this isn't something that you learned to do overnight, and that's why, a lot of your work focuses on reframe. Is that a fair statement?
Definitely a fair statement. I not even not learned it overnight. I'm still doing it. I still have to do it with myself on a daily basis, right?
Amen for that. Now, I know that your book is perfect. However, is there anything that you wish you would have put in the book, but you didn't?
You know what's funny? When you write a book, you don't think about the fact that there is a stopping point. There is a point at which you cannot write anymore and you have to deliver the manuscript. And then time moves on and the book comes out and it is a moment in time, right? And what's fascinating is, as I mentioned earlier, I started writing the book really, really early on in my career, in my new career, in my coaching work and my work in neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And I have learned so much in the time since the manuscript was finished and since the book was published that I wish were in the book, but it's not. So things like the incredible effects of hormones and why so many women in midlife are suddenly discovering that they are neurodivergent. It's not like we suddenly became different. It's that the hormones that we experience drops in during perimenopause and menopause exacerbate symptoms that we may have had all our lives, but we're really, really good at masking. And they come out differently. And we also just, you get to a certain age and you're like, okay, no more. Can I say bad words on here?
I think so.
No more fucks to give. Excuse me if you're not a big bad language person, but when you get to that point and you start learning to unmask a little bit on your own, it makes some of these other things stand out a little bit more. So there's a whole area around that I wish I had known before I published the book and that I had, put it out there. And the other one is just more about how different forms of neurodivergence can look in different genders, in different ages, in people who we are all wired differently. And there are just a lot of things that have come up, especially with my own ADHD, which was very new when I wrote the book. And I've learned a lot more about that. So definitely things I would add. Maybe there will be a second edition at some point.
Yeah, those are two great additions. I think with the first one, a lot of women, including myself, have been called emotional. and or you just on your period. Sometimes, like, because I identify as being ADHD, I would get that a lot as, oh, you're just raging again today. And then of course I would turn around and snap, well, that's not me, proving their point even more. And so I think that research that you're saying about how it affects women in perimenopause, menopause, and it even can cause those symptoms to set on earlier, which then further exacerbate, your neurodiversity. So I think that's a great addition. And same with your other one. I think that's extremely powerful to add, especially when you think about, I've been reading and thinking a lot about like intersectionality and how neurodiversity and neurodivergence, because it's a social term now, and that's kind of what we're saying is, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with our brains. We might be processing and showing up differently, but it's not bad. But different depends on us having some kind of standard of expectation, which, as you know, differs from society to society. And so as I've been talking to people from different countries and in different races and genders, the complexity just grows, which means maybe not just a second edition, maybe another book.
Give me a little time to get back to the business, and then yes, I would love to write more about this. And I would also welcome collaboration. So if anybody out there is an author and wants to work on a second edition with me or another book with me, reach out. I would love to hear from you.
That's right. Okay, so you also talked about burnout and self-care, assuming related to some of those challenges, of being highly perceptive and neurodiverse. Why is this topic, especially burnout and self-care, why is this so important, that it takes up a pretty big section in your book?
So one of the things that I learned during researching for a book can be invaluable. I mean, I learned an enormous amount while I was doing the research and the preparation. Um, and that was when I learned about neurodivergent burnout, sometimes known as autistic burnout, but it's actually being thought of much more broadly now. Um, as opposed to, and I'm going to again use my air quotes here, generic burnout. There are actually, and I write about this in the book, there are definitions of burnout from the World Health Organization that kind of exclude a lot of the neurodivergent burnout experience. And I won't go into all of it here, and I'm sure a lot of people here have already experienced this personally, but neurodivergent burnout can be chronic. It can go much deeper. It can last much longer than, there are a lot of people now who are kind of throwing around the term burnout and saying, oh, yeah, I worked so hard this week, I'm kind of burned out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to disparage that. And yes, exhaustion is a real thing and fatigue is a real thing. And neurodivergent burnout is a different phenomenon. And there are many, many, many reasons for it. And we don't have time to, do a whole thing on it. But this is why I've actually done a talk on this for thousands of people because it is so important that we learn to put ourselves first and to take care of ourselves so that we can be there to take care of other people. I have an incredible number of clients who are in burnout right now or recovering from it, and several who have either just taken medical leave or are returning from medical leave or are considering taking medical leave because of it. And we have to learn how to take better care of ourselves. And one of the things that I talk about in the self-care chapter is it's not about bubble baths. It's not about spa days. It's not about taking vacations. All of those are important if you enjoy those things. What it is about is listening to your body, your soul, your mind, your spirit, and doing whatever they are asking of you. And sometimes that is taking time off. And honestly, if you're in the middle of neurodivergent burnout, taking a week off from work is not going to cut it. You need more time than that. It's going to take you a week just to decompress. Again, I could go on and on and on and on about this. It's something I'm really, really passionate about because it is a very personal experience for me. I have burned myself out multiple times, and once so severely. I was a director at a Fortune 500 in 2014, and I burned myself out so severely that I ended up having to not only quit my job, but sell my home and move to rural Peru
Mm.
to find the time and the space that I needed to really start my recovery journey. And that recovery journey took years, not just weeks or months. So, again, something I'm really, really, really passionate about.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that passion. What's the key message, during Neurodiversity Celebration Week? What's the key message that you really want our audience to know?
I think a couple of things. One of them is what I was just saying about taking care of yourself. Learn to put yourself first. Learn to give yourself what you need without feeling guilty about it or feeling shame around it. Um, and embrace your gifts. We all have them. Some of us have one, some of us have many. There are things that you can do that not everyone around you can do. And if you learn to embrace those things, they can often help you manage some of the challenges a little more differently. But you are a gift, you are perfect just the way you are. And those messages that you might have grown up with um, were by people who just didn't get it and they don't mean anything.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. And, as I mentioned, a big part of Squirrel Space is doing that acorn sharing. And so you sharing your story is incredibly powerful and courageous. And I hope that, you've been able to touch some people out in the audience. And I encourage people in the chat, as you have been, keep putting those stories in there. This is kind of part of that magic of acorn sharing. Um, I want to circle back to kind of some of what you talk about with self-care and community. As we're kind of talking about what are some of those ways that we can keep this celebration going. Do you want to speak at all to some of the community building and just connection and the importance of that you bring up in the book?
Well, that's so thank you for mentioning that. One of the things that I do talk about in the self-care chapter is finding our people. I know that was something for me personally that I grew up feeling really, really alone. I knew that my brain processed things differently. I knew that I wasn't like the other kids around me. And that lasted pretty much throughout, I don't know, until maybe my early 50s. Um, Community had never been something that I had prioritized. And that has never become more important to me than it is now. And that's one of the reasons that I was so drawn to Squirrel Space when I first met you and learned about it. So, if you're up for it, I would love to kind of turn the tables a little bit and ask you a few questions about Squirrel Space.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. And by the way, we'll continue. We'll still look at the questions and answer some. But Emily, I know you and I have had some conversations recently about all of the people who are talking to you about learning about their neurodivergence and self-identification and discovery of neurodivergence and sharing stories and sharing acorns. So how does all of that fit into Squarespace, Squirrel Space?
Yes, different shapes.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me. I think the important part is this really peer-to-peer, no judgment space. It's when, you feel free to share your story. And I was diagnosed pretty young. But I realized with Squirrel Space, and I'll share a fun secret, which is no longer a secret with you, which is I got fired for asking for accommodations a little bit over a year ago by the head of HR, who then said it was my fault for not disclosing my disability in the job interview, which is very silly and illegal, as most of us here should know. And I was so mad, in my sort of emotional regulation challenges that I have, that I went around, again, safe space here, basically bitching to everybody I had been fired, and I was so mad about it. And what I realized is it was like a shared grief. It was people who were telling me that I didn't even know had a connection to neurodiversity, that their daughters or their uncles or their aunts or someone they knew had a story that was really similar to mine. And that emotion and that like validation of just hearing, what, that isn't right. You aren't volatile, unstable. And, of course, that was some of the reason I was sharing is I was going to people who I trusted, but I found myself going to people that I didn't know and sharing my story as well. And not only feeling good about sharing my story, and sometimes I watched their reaction and sometimes the story just came out, but it was something really healing and powerful especially from the people that said, thank you for sharing that. That was brave. And I didn't even realize that it was a lot of courage, to do that. And so that's the magic of acorn sharing is, finding, that self-realization and acceptance within yourself where it gives you almost like this compulsion to share your story. Sometimes it's in the form of a book. Sometimes it's just babbling at people uncontrollably like I did. We all we all have our way of like healing and recovering. And what I think is really powerful is doing it together, is saying, hey, kind of like what you said, Rachel, I'm not perfect and I don't have this all figured out, but I'm willing to support you along the way. And that's the magic of acorn sharing. And so we even have an acorn wall in Squirrel Space where people are coming and showing up and telling their story. And I'm hoping it just creates kind of this movement of the spark of like these like burst of acorns where we're sharing our story and we're all just going a little bit nuts.
I love that. That's beautiful. And thank you for sharing your story, your acorn, Emily, because I hadn't heard that. Um, so my next question may be very related to this, but it's really, can you tell us a little bit about what spurred you to create Squirrel Space and who it's really for?
Yeah. It was actually during that moment of when I was kind of creating those connections and uncontrollably babbling and getting babbling back, where it made me realize that the things that I went through as a teenager are still happening today. And now what I'm realizing is there's an impact too on the parents with the people who are a little bit closer to my age group, is that there's a lot of people who have not been diagnosed, who can't get a diagnosis. And Squirrel Space is really about creating acceptance and support for people, no matter where their neurodiversity journey is. But in particular, our programming really helps with people who have recently, discovered their neurodivergence or are on the path to discovering. They want some support and community to feel comfortable, to feel held, to create space for this, this neurodivergence, this almost kind of coming out, if you will, where the acorn just like burst open and all of a sudden, here we are in this glory of neurodivergence. And that's kind of who it's created for, is people that are discovering. And then there is, to me, this feeling of wanting to give back, of this peer-to-peer, community where we can solve a lot of our own problems and we can ask for what we need when the power is not ours, and it's not ours to control. We can make that ask. And that's what I call advocacy. And so that's what Squirrel Space is designed to do, is bring us together, because there's so many of us now individually, but there's so much power in community. And when the community knocks on the door, of corporate and says, here we are, that's what I want to see, is this like beautiful, army of squirrels and their acorns, and it's together holding hands or paws and saying, we are special, we are different, and we are worth the time, to know and to be with. And so that's what Squirrel Space is for.
I love it. Um, Squirrel Space also very recently earned its 501c3 status. And for those of you outside of the United States, it's a nonprofit organization status, which is a difficult process to go through. So congratulations, Emily, for earning that for the organization. So what are your plans for Squirrel Space?
Oh, yes. Okay. So ADHD brain is going, it's firing. And if I had to pick a few things, this 501c3 status is extremely, extremely beneficial from a fundraising perspective. One thing that I've, really taken a hold of is coaching and culture, and being able to provide people services that are otherwise either hard to find or they don't realize because it's not something that the medical community talks about. And so Squirrel Space and what I'm doing with the 501c3 is really making sure that I'm creating partnerships with corporations and healthcare communities where I'm bringing in a lot of the services that aren't talked about, and a lot of support that is hard to find. And of course, some of the things where if somebody can't get a diagnosis, but they want one, or they don't need a formal diagnosis, but they want some kind of structured process. Today, these things are very expensive to get and they're hard to find. What I want for Squirrel Space is to be able to provide, acorn vouchers to reduce the cost of these services, whether it's coaching, or maybe it is, somatic healing, or maybe it's a recreational therapy, or maybe there is, sound bathing. So the things that people need to do, some are free and some cost money. And unfortunately, to get a diagnosis, for example, that costs a lot of money. And so I am working very closely with some therapists and coaches to really find a way that we can reduce that cost of service or also offer alternatives that don't get the medical stamp of approval, but as self-discovery is a pretty big part of this community, really providing that as our service is a way to keep building this community.
Love it. So many good things in there and so much more to come because I know how your brain works, Emily. Um, okay, so two more questions and then we will jump to questions for the group. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, a lot of people have commented on the name Squirrel Space. Where did that come from?
Yes, it is that I do self-identify as a squirrel. It's just like when I think of like the little movement patterns that I make just to try to leave the house, it's where's my purse? Where's my keys? Where's my phone? Am I wearing the right clothes? And do I have matching socks on? And me going in and out of this door and just thinking about what I look like. And I know what I look like half the time. And I look like a squirrel running around, gathering these acorns, trying to find the right branch to be on, running around, laughing half the time, but looking a little bit frantic. So that's what Squirrel Space is. It's reframing. You know, we're not a mess. We're not disorganized. We're squirrels. We're just a little different.
Reframing is a big theme today. I love that. Um, Last question for you. What is something special we should know about Squirrel Space and your message for Neurodiversity Celebration Week?
I think the important message and thing to take away is acorn sharing matters, community matters, and just showing up and giving somebody, you know, a genuine, real, hey, I really like this about you. I think there's something very, very, very uplifting about hearing that from someone else who's neurodiverse, someone else that gets it. So just keep this feeling going. Share your acorn, stop and drop by and drop it in the acorn wall. But let's just keep it going. These types of things are so special. Is feel free to message me. I think Rachel would probably feel the same way and share that acorn. You know, we would love to keep sharing it and share your story and join your community because we're all together. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. Um,
Yes. Okay. Well, we have some questions in the chat. Why don't we open this off? I know that there's some questions in the chat, so let's go ahead and kind of go through these. Rachel, are there any that have popped out to you? I'm just scrolling back up now.
so there were a couple that popped out to me. I also just want to share my contact information. I know some people have had to jump and there are other events that are coming up. So I'm just going to put my contact information in the chat.
Definitely.
And if you want to go ahead and line up some of the questions, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So one of the ones that I saw just come in was for both of us, and the question is, I'd be interested in your thinking on an experience of opening up to people about your neurodiverse attribute. When is it trust building and productive versus misinterpreted as weakness or excuse making? He provides a little bit of context and about his or her home life, and so asking. Okay, kind of asking for a survival guide or ways to think about sharing and disclosing your neurodiversity.
Got it. Yeah, I see that's from Christina. So wow, there are a lot of layers here, and I think I've talked with a lot of people about um, opening up and talking about neurodivergence, and there are so many factors that play into this. There is how safe you feel, which I think is the number one factor. How much psychological safety there is in the environment and with the person that you're talking with. Um, in terms of, I mean, Christina, you ask about helping students, and um, as Emily was talking about, and I'm obviously thinking as I'm talking, but as Emily was talking about, sharing acorns and that's also a lot of what I did in my book too. It's not just my story. I actually interviewed 16 different women from different walks of life and different, career paths, all of whom think and operate and perceive a little bit differently. And I told their stories, parts of their stories. I think when you feel safe sharing about yourself, it does open up an entire world of opportunity for other people, especially when we talk about how different neurodivergence can look for different people and how misunderstood it still is in the world and how many misconceptions there are. That the more of us who feel safe sharing in certain arenas and certain contexts, the more we can all raise awareness together and help students and others understand that they are not alone, that just because they perceive the world or experience the world a little bit differently does not make them less or wrong or broken or crazy or any of the things that many of us grew up hearing. So I'll stop babbling because I could go on about this. How about you, Emily?
A good question. It's interesting because one, I think of reframe, and I think practicing that, when somebody is pushing back, or if we need to disclose. I saw the kind of context about it being with college, and my experience has also been in the workplace. But I remember my mom got me accommodations when I was in high school to get extra time on a math test, and we faced some of these same questions, which is wondering if we're using it as an excuse, which to me was preposterous since I had a 4.0 in high school, and it didn't seem to be a strong case, for me looking for extra points. But it is a very common question, sometimes coming from people who genuinely don't understand. So my first thing is I try to reframe it in my brain first, so that when I'm, getting prepared to ask or disclose, that I make sure it's coming out in the way that comes across as positive. And that way it avoids a little bit more of the using it as an excuse, as, hey, I'd like to share this, and then I would share, and what it means is, and so then I try to say the implication, and what makes this, easier, or ways to engage or work with me is blah, and then share that. And I do think, though, making sure that you feel comfortable in practicing it, saying it yourself, and the way that you want to frame it will make a big difference. And then the second thing is, there isn't a right or wrong answer. It is such a nuanced question. And unfortunately, there are a lot of realities, that make it harder to disclose in the workplace, in college. There's a lot of political realities. And so one thing that I have done for myself, this is why you see it coming through Squirrel Space so much, is I've been working with a coach for the last 5 years, same coach actually. And these are some of the things that we work for, because sometimes we have to trust our bodies, our minds, our experiences, to know if it is psychologically safe. Not every situation is the same. And so these are types of questions that I bring to my coach. And really what I've learned is oftentimes the answer lives within me. It's about what I'm comfortable sharing in that moment, and how much I sense that accommodation is going to be worth the disclosure and who I'm disclosing to. So I don't think there's like an easy answer here, but working with a coach and someone that you really trust to honor your intentions and values, I think, is the way that I have chosen to manage these types of things.
Absolutely. I am looking through the chat to see whether they have whether there are other questions. There is a lot of conversation and a lot of things that I'm really looking forward to reading more thoroughly later on when we have some time. If anybody has a question that we did not get to, please go ahead and copy it into the bottom of the chat, or into the chat now, so that we can see it. Or feel free to raise your digital hand or your physical hand, and we can, if you want to speak up live, we can do that. We also, Emily, do you want to let them know about the book chat?
Okay.
That is coming up
I know
next.
this is late notice, but Rachel and I are hosting a book chat about Perceptive, where we are going to continue this acorn sharing. And so even if you have not read the book, You are welcome to come, share your story. We'll just be talking about some of the themes. And this time, it won't be Rachel and I just talking. We'll be opening it up to other people who have or have not read the book. So, Rachel, maybe do you want to put that link in the chat here for people to join, even though they won't be able to register?
I will in a second. I am just responding to a comment, and then I will do that.
Great.
I
And
am one of those people that cannot do many things at one time, so give me a second.
I totally understand. So, if anyone wants to find Rachel or I know Rachel's putting her information in the chat, or already has. We'll be sending out an email for anyone who wants to come and continue sharing with us. Rachel offers a lot of great coaching for people who are neurodiverse and highly sensitive or highly perceptive, however you'd like to self-identify. Rachel's coaching organization is RER Coaching. We'll be sharing some information. And of course, you can join us in Squirrel Space. We hope that you'll keep going to other sessions for Neurodiversity Celebration Week. We'd love to attend some of your sessions. So as we are communicating with all of you, please feel free to send us back information. And we can't wait to hear from you again. Thank you so much all for being here. It was a pleasure. And thank you, Rachel. It was absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking with you, Emily, and sharing more about Squirrel Space. And I did share the book chat discussion link in the chat. You do not have to have read the book to attend. I also see, will the book session be recorded and shared? I think we were not going to be recording the book chat just because we want people to feel able to just participate in any way they want to. And it's going to be less formal, less prepared questions, less specifically about the book, and more people sharing kind of their own questions and versions and stories and things like that.
Yep, and perhaps we'll have an acorn sharing, event in the future, because I know a lot of people have plans for neurodiversity celebration events. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. And Rachel, I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
Thank
It
you
was
so
lovely to see
much.
you.
Go and celebrate.